The room fell silent the moment the Duke stepped inside. Every voice faded, every smile froze, and every eye turned toward the man who had just changed the shape of the evening. He did not arrive alone. At his side stood a woman no one recognized, dressed simply, her hands bare of jewels, her posture calm but unyielding. And in that instant, before a single word was spoken, everyone understood that the wedding about to begin would never be remembered for vows or flowers. In the autumn of 1893, society in New York City moved by strict rules. Money mattered, family names mattered, and a woman's future was decided long before she learned how to speak for herself. Clara Whitmore had learned this truth early in life. By the age of 23, she had already lost her parents, her home, and every comfort she once believed was permanent. What remained was her pride, quiet and stubborn, and a strength that had grown in the shadow of hardship. Clara lived in a modest boarding house on the edge of Manhattan, earning what little she could by teaching children from working families how to read and write. Her dresses were plain but clean. Her shoes were worn but polished. She did not complain, because she had learned that complaint changed nothing. Still, there were nights when she stared at the ceiling and wondered how her life had been so easily discarded by the world that once welcomed her. Years earlier, she had belonged to a different life. Her father had been a respected accountant. Her mother had hosted small gatherings filled with music and laughter. Clara had been educated, hopeful, and certain that love would be part of her future. That certainty had been shattered the day her parents died within months of each other, leaving debts no one had warned them about. The house was sold. The savings vanished. Friends disappeared quietly, politely, and forever. It was during that fall into obscurity that Clara first met Duke Henry Ashford. He was not yet a duke then, only the heir to the title, newly returned from Europe. They met at a charity lecture where Clara volunteered to distribute pamphlets. He spoke to her as if she mattered. He listened. He asked questions. For a brief and dangerous time, Clara believed kindness might grow into something more. But kindness did not survive pressure. When Henry's family learned of her background, the distance appeared overnight. Invitations stopped. Letters went unanswered. And one afternoon, Henry stood across from her with regret in his eyes and duty on his shoulders. He spoke of responsibility, of expectations, of sacrifice. He did not say love. Weeks later, Clara read in the paper that Henry Ashford was engaged to Eleanor Beaumont, the daughter of a powerful railroad magnate. That was 5 years ago. Now Eleanor Beaumont was about to become the Duchess of Ashford. The wedding was held in a grand hall overlooking Central Park, decorated in ivory silk and gold trim. Guests arrived in carriages lined one after another, their laughter floating above the street like music meant only for the fortunate. Inside, crystal chandeliers reflected a world untouched by worry. Eleanor stood in a private room with her attendants, admired for her beauty, her fortune, and her triumph. She had won what she wanted. The man, the title, the future. Yet even as she smiled, there was tension beneath her calm, because she had heard the rumors. Henry Ashford was unpredictable. When the doors opened and the Duke entered, conversation stopped. He wore black, formal, and severe. But it was not his presence alone that stunned the room. It was the woman beside him. Clara Whitmore walked with steady steps, her chin lifted, her expression unreadable. She wore a simple dark blue dress, carefully mended, fitted to her form without extravagance. There was no attempt to compete with wealth, no effort to impress. She looked exactly like what she was, uninvited. Whispers moved through the hall like wind through dry leaves. Who is she? Why is she here? Is that her? Eleanor turned slowly, her smile faltering when her eyes landed on Clara. Recognition struck hard and fast. Her fingers tightened around her bouquet. This was not supposed to happen. Henry had promised the past was finished. Henry led Clara forward, ignoring the tension thickening the air. He did not look at Eleanor. He did not look at the guests. His attention remained fixed ahead, as though the path he walked had been chosen long ago and could no longer be avoided. Clara felt every stare, every judgment. She felt the weight of the room pressing down on her chest, but she did not stop. She had agreed to come for one reason only, not revenge, not anger, but truth. Henry had found her 3 days earlier. She had been correcting papers when the boarding house keeper knocked on her door and announced a visitor. When she opened it, she nearly closed it again. Henry looked older, not weaker, but heavier, as if years of silence had settled into his bones. He did not waste time with apologies. He told her the truth, that he was trapped in a marriage arranged to preserve power, not happiness. That Eleanor knew his heart had never been fully hers, that the wedding felt like a sentence rather than a celebration. Clara had listened without interruption. When he finished, she had asked one question. "Why me?" Henry answered honestly. Because she was the only person who knew who he was before the title claimed him. And because he needed the truth to stand beside him, even if it condemned him. She had laughed then. Not from humor, but from disbelief. Yet when he asked her to attend the wedding with him, something inside her shifted. Not hope. Not longing. Resolve. Now, standing in that hall, Clara felt no fear. Only clarity. The ceremony began with uneasy formality. Eleanor walked down the aisle, radiant and admired. Henry stood waiting, his expression distant. Clara was guided to a seat near the front, though no one knew where she belonged. The officiant spoke of union and devotion, words that echoed hollowly in the vast room. Then came the moment. Just before the vows, Henry raised his hand. The room froze again. He turned, not toward Eleanor, but toward the guests. "There is something I must say before this continues." Gasps followed. Eleanor's face drained of color. Henry spoke clearly, without haste. He spoke of choices made under pressure, of love set aside for convenience, of promises broken quietly to preserve appearances. And then he spoke of Clara. He named her. "The woman I once loved was erased from my life because she had no fortune to offer. I allowed that to happen. And today, I refuse to pretend that silence was honorable." Murmurs turned sharp. Eleanor stepped forward, her voice trembling with fury. "This is cruelty, Henry. You humiliate me for your conscience." Clara rose before he could answer. Her movement drew every eye. She did not shout. She did not accuse. She spoke simply. "I am not here to reclaim anything. I am here because I was invited to be invisible once, and I agreed. Today, I refuse." She turned to Eleanor. "You won what you wanted, but winning does not erase truth. And truth does not ask permission to be spoken." The room erupted in chaos. Some guests stood. Others whispered. Eleanor's hands shook. Henry said nothing. He did not need to. Clara picked up her coat. "I will leave now. I came to remind myself that poverty does not mean worthlessness, and silence is not dignity." She walked toward the doors alone. Behind her, nothing would ever return to order, and as the doors closed, Clara Whitmore stepped back into the cold air, unaware that her bold act had only begun a transformation that would change her life, and Henry's, forever. The cold air outside the hall felt sharper than any insult Clara had ever endured. It cut into her lungs as she stepped down from the stone stairs and onto the quiet street, where the noise of the wedding was sealed behind heavy doors. For a moment she stood still, her hands trembling despite her calm face. Only when the carriage pulled away without her did she truly understand what she had done. She had spoken in a room where women like her were never meant to speak. A few guests watched from the windows as she walked away, her figure growing smaller against the wide street. None followed. None called her back. That was as she expected. What she did not expect was the sound of footsteps behind her. Henry Ashford caught up to her at the corner, his breath uneven, his composure gone. "Clara, wait." She stopped but did not turn. "You should not have come after me." "I could not let you leave alone," he said. "Not after everything." She faced him then, and the anger she had kept tightly locked finally surfaced in her eyes. "Everything ended years ago, Henry. Tonight was not about us. It was about truth. And truth has consequences." He nodded slowly, as if each word landed heavily. "The wedding is over," he said. "It cannot continue after what I said." "That is not my concern," Clara replied. "Your life will go on. Mine always has." She turned to leave again, but this time he reached for her arm, stopping himself just short of touching her. "What do you want from me now?" She laughed softly, without joy. "Nothing. I want nothing from you. I came tonight to take something back. My voice." Henry watched her go, knowing she was right. For the first time in his life, he understood that love could not survive where courage had failed. The next morning, New York woke hungry for scandal. Newspapers carried headlines filled with speculation and outrage. Some blamed Henry for cruelty. Others painted Clara as a schemer who had planned the disruption. Her name appeared in print beside words like disgraced and shameless. People who had never met her felt free to decide who she was. By noon, Clara had lost her teaching position. The school board summoned her briefly, spoke in careful tones about reputation and donors, and ended the conversation without apology. She gathered her books and left through the side door, the echo of children's voices trailing behind her like a wound she could not close. That night, she packed. There was little to take. A few dresses, her notebooks, her mother's worn Bible. She planned to leave the city by morning, though she did not yet know where she would go. Before dawn, there was a knock at her door. It was Mrs. Callahan, the boarding house owner, holding a letter with a wax seal. "A messenger brought this late last night," she said gently. "From a lawyer, I believe." Clara thanked her and closed the door. The letter was from Henry. He wrote of consequences already unfolding, of Eleanor's family withdrawing, of society closing ranks against him. And then, unexpectedly, he wrote of freedom. "I have resigned my claim to the marriage settlement. I will not accept wealth built on lies. I have also arranged a trust in your name, drawn from my personal holdings, not my title. You may refuse it. I will respect that. But I owed you more than silence." Clara folded the letter slowly. She did not feel relief. She felt tired. By afternoon, she was gone from New York, boarding a westbound train with no announcement and no farewell. She chose Chicago, a city spoken of as rough, growing, and unconcerned with pedigree. A city that cared more for what you could do than who you had been. Chicago in 1893 was loud, restless, and alive. Smoke curled above brick buildings. Men shouted over machinery. Women walked with purpose. Clara rented a small room near the rail yards and found work within days, teaching immigrant children in a settlement house that did not ask about her past. Weeks turned into months. She cut her hair shorter for convenience. She learned to speak firmly, to command rooms filled with noise and need. The children listened. They trusted her. And slowly, the whispers of New York faded into something distant and unimportant. One evening, as winter pressed hard against the city, Clara was called into the settlement director's office. A visitor waited. She expected trouble. Instead, she found Henry. He looked different. No title in his posture, no certainty in his eyes. "I am not here to ask anything," he said quickly. "I came to tell you that I am leaving New York. I will be working with railway laborers in the West. I needed you to know that your courage did not destroy me. It freed me." Clara studied him for a long moment. "I am glad," she said at last. "Truly." They stood in silence, not as lovers, but as two people who had finally stepped out of shadows. As Henry turned to leave, Clara felt no ache, only closure. But what she did not know was that Eleanor Beaumont, humiliated and furious, had not accepted defeat. And far away, plans were forming that would soon pull Clara back into the world she believed she had escaped. The past was not finished with her yet, and when it returned, it would demand far more than her voice. Winter loosened its grip on Chicago slowly, as if the city had to be convinced that spring was allowed to return. Snow melted into dark streets. Smoke lifted higher into the sky, and Clara Whitmore found herself busier than ever. Her classroom at the settlement house had doubled in size. Children crowded onto benches, their accents thick, their hands rough from factory work, their eyes bright with hunger for something better. Clara taught reading in the mornings, writing in the afternoons, and hope every hour in between. She no longer thought of herself as fallen or forgotten. She thought of herself as useful. That peace lasted 3 months. The letter arrived on a gray morning, delivered by a man who asked her name twice, as if confirming it carried weight. The envelope was heavy, expensive, the seal unfamiliar. Clara opened it slowly. Inside was a formal summons. She was being accused of moral misconduct, fraud, and intentional disruption of a lawful marriage. The complaint had been filed in New York, backed by sworn statements. Her presence was requested, strongly advised, and quietly threatened. Eleanor Beaumont. Clara sat very still as the words settled. She understood immediately. This was not about justice. This was punishment. The settlement director urged her not to go. "These people have money and power," she said. "They will crush you." But Clara had learned something important since leaving New York. Running did not bring peace. Standing did. She packed once more. When Clara returned to New York, the city felt smaller, meaner, like a place she had outgrown. Word spread quickly that the woman from the ruined wedding had come back. Curiosity replaced pity. Some wanted to see her broken. Others wanted entertainment. The hearing was held in a private chamber, not a courtroom. Eleanor sat across the room, dressed in black silk, her face flawless and cold. Henry was not present. He had been named, but not summoned. Eleanor spoke first. She described humiliation, public disgrace, a wedding destroyed by a woman who refused to accept her place. She spoke of intention, of planning, of revenge disguised as virtue. When it was Clara's turn, she stood alone. She did not cry. She did not plead. "I did not attend the wedding to disrupt it," she said. "I attended because I was invited. I spoke because I was given the floor. I told the truth. If truth caused damage, that damage already existed." One of the men interrupted her. "You benefited from the Duke's attention, did you not?" Clara met his eyes. "I lost my livelihood, my reputation, my safety. If that is benefit, it is an expensive one." Eleanor smiled faintly. "She is clever," Eleanor said. "That is her danger." Clara turned to her then. "No," she said calmly. "My danger to you is that I survived." The room shifted. Evidence was requested. Letters. Proof. Witnesses. Clara had little to offer. She had lived quietly, worked honestly, left no trail worth tracking, but Eleanor had overreached. Henry Ashford arrived unannounced on the second day. He brought documents, correspondence between Eleanor and private investigators, letters outlining plans to ruin Clara's credibility, notes discussing timing, optics, and public sympathy, proof that the scandal had been engineered not just once, but repeatedly. The men reviewing the papers went silent. Eleanor stood. "This is a betrayal," she said sharply. "No," Henry replied. "This is accountability." The complaint was dismissed, not publicly, not loudly, but completely. Eleanor left the room without a word. Outside, reporters waited. Questions flew. Names were called. Clara did not stop. Henry walked beside her until the street widened and the noise softened. "You are free now," he said. She nodded. "I always was. I just had to learn it." He hesitated. There is one more thing, the trust I created. You never answered. Clara stopped. I will accept it, she said. On one condition. Name it. It funds schools, settlement houses, women who need education and work. Not my comfort. Henry smiled, not sadly this time. That is exactly why it belongs to you. Clara returned to Chicago changed again, but not shaken. The settlement expanded within a year. New teachers were hired. A small library opened. Her name appeared on no plaques. She preferred it that way. As for Eleanor Beaumont, society did not punish her loudly either. It simply turned away. Invitations slowed. Allies distanced themselves. Power without admiration grew heavy. Henry Ashford never married. He worked. Quietly, away from crowds. He sent reports to Clara once a year. She read them with respect, not longing. Years passed. One spring afternoon, as Clara dismissed her students, a man waited near the doorway. He wore plain clothes. His hands bore ink stains. His smile was nervous but kind. "My name is Samuel Brooks," he said. "I read about your school. I wondered if you needed help." She did. They worked together. Slowly, carefully, as equals. Love, when it came, did not arrive like a storm. It came like steady ground. On the 10th anniversary of the wedding that never was, Clara stood before a room filled with teachers and children and donors who had never asked where she came from. She told them a simple truth. I was once brought into a room where I was not wanted. I spoke anyway, and my life began. No one applauded wildly. They listened. And that was enough.